Okay, welcome everyone to today's webinar, and it's on the healthy adult's role in schema healing and emotional well-being. So this is a really important topic if well-being and mental health and emotional health is really important to you. And if you work in this field, then it's going to be doubly important, both to your own personal life as well as to your clients, the clients that are coming to you to see you for support with their own emotional health and well-being. All right, so today my goal is to really unpack what is meant by this healthy adult side of us, this part of us that has the capacity to really cultivate well-being in our own lives and overcome, emotional challenges and maintain a really healthy sense of self. Okay, so my name is Tracey Hunter. I'm a psychologist and a coach, and myself and my partner, my business partner, Dr. Rachel Wheeler, we have developed the Wellbeing Codes, where we support other health professionals and therapists to really get a deep understanding of well-being. Okay, so the work that I'll be talking about today is largely based on the schema therapy model, which is a therapy approach to help people to identify sources of emotional complaints or psychological disturbances that have origins in the past. So because of past events or messages during childhood, we can develop these negative schemas that impact us in our adult lives. So the Wellbeing Codes is based on releasing and healing these schemas and activating full emotional health and well-being. All right, so it might be useful to start with a nice definition of the healthy adult mode so you can have a sense of what we're talking about. So Dr. Jeffrey Young, who is the founder of Schema Therapy, his definition, or is largely loosely this definition here, I've paraphrased some of the words just to make it a little bit more in layperson's language. So the definition of the healthy adult mode is this side of us that nurtures, validates, and affirms our own vulnerable feelings. It sets limits on the intensity of our anger expression and impulses and urges. So that means that we have self-control. We're able to control the degree to which we express certain things. This side of us embraces fun, play, and spontaneity. It addresses our own defenses and coping mechanisms learned in childhood that block our needs. So this healthy adult side of us is able to look at, oh, that's a side of me that's a little bit avoidant. I need to address that. And also the healthy adult mode neutralizes and moderates our inner critic. So everyone's got this inner critical voice that's quite judgmental of ourselves. And the healthy adult side of us is able to kind of separate it out and have a bit of a conversation with it and set limits on it and not just always be dictated by the inner critic. Okay, so the healthy adult mode also performs appropriate adult functions such as working, parenting, taking responsibility and committing, pursues pleasurable adult activities such as sex, intellectual, aesthetic, and cultural interests, health maintenance, and athletic activities. So hopefully just hearing that definition, you're, yes, please, sign me up. More of that, please. More healthy adult in my life, please. And so today is really about unpacking this healthy adult mode to give you some real useful tools that you can take away and apply straight away in your own lives as well as in your clients' lives. Okay. Now, normally in a psychology run webinar, you would expect to launch straight into information. But today I'd like to do something that's quite different for psychologists, at least, and that is to experience something in our body. Okay, so a lot of the times in psychology, we're all about information and content and knowledge, and we like to have big words and concepts and models that we can go away and talk to other people about. But a lot of the time we miss a really important aspect of emotional health and well-being, and that is information in our body and experiencing well-being in our bodies. All right, so to do that, I invite all of you right now, and if you prefer, you can close your eyes, and I will close my eyes also. And I invite you to put both of your hands on your belly in the solar plexus area of your body, which is just above your belly button. It's really the center of your body. And I want you to imagine that the energy that's stored in this center of your body holds your unique identity, your separate sense of self. No one else is like you. And in this center of your body, you have a really strong connection to your sense of self. Just imagine feeling strong in this center here. Allow this center to fill up with feelings of certainty, a feeling of courage to face the world from your own unique perspective. Just really allow yourself to experience this deep inner knowing of who you are, separate to anyone else in the world. And for those of you who can easily access this sense of self, then you can just lock this in. You can just say, that's where I go to find my center, to know my truth, who I am, my sense of self. And for those of you who are noticing that it brings up some uncomfortable feelings for you, then that is also useful information, because you can practice this, coming back to your center and really developing your own unique sense of self, which includes your opinions, your own unique needs, your temperament, your personality, your values, your goals, your outlook on life. All of that is uniquely you. And if you're a little bit uncertain of this sense of self, then you can practice coming back to this center and asking relevant questions to yourself around, who am I? What do I stand for? What do I like? What do I not like? All of those questions that will help you, give you more information about your unique sense of self. Okay, and just really lock that in, this feeling of certainty that happens right there in the solar plexus area. And perhaps for some of you, a sense of calm, just knowing who you really are. Okay. And I invite you to just gradually bring your attention back into the here and now and back to the webinar. Okay, all right. So that is a a form of body work where we can drop into our bodies, because a lot of the times we spend too much time in our heads because maybe something has triggered us, upset us, and we go into our heads, which is where all of our schemas kind of exist. Well, at least the core beliefs connected to these schemas. And we start drawing from beliefs that are not helpful to us. They're not healthy or necessarily the most important information. So sometimes we just need to get better at practicing dropping into our bodies and accessing that nice solid core. Okay, all right. So let's get into the information, which a lot of you are here for. Okay, so why is the healthy adult mode so important to our well-being? Okay, so firstly, the healthy adult mode is a part of us, of the self, that's conscious and intentional about our own well-being. So what do I mean by conscious? Well, it's aware, it's awake to the fact that our own well-being is our responsibility and we need to do things and work on it and prioritize it. So conscious in that sense. And also intentional. So when I use the word intentional, what I'm referring to is being focused, putting our focus and our attention on a specific outcome or a value. Okay, so if we're intentional about our well-being, then we're probably doing things towards cultivating more well-being. If we value it, if we prioritize it, if we say, I want to work towards my well-being, as opposed to being less conscious and not very intentional or specific about exactly what we want to cultivate in our lives. Okay, so this healthy adult mode is a part of us that has the capacity to set higher order goals and values, such as, what is the kind of life I want to create, or what kind of relationship do I want to create, or what do I want my relationship to money to be like, or how do I want to raise my children, all of these higher order goals, as opposed to more immediate frustrations, because we have to really tolerate short-term frustrations and these day-by-day emotional reactions if we're wanting to live in alignment with our deeper core needs and values, as opposed to just reacting to what life and what the world is throwing in front of us at any given moment. Okay, so the next logical question is, well, why don't we live more of our life from this healthy adult mode then, if it leads to such great states of well-being? And that basically comes down to how our brains are designed, our tricky little brains. So let's just understand what is creating this inner tension. Okay, so there's basically an inner battle going on in our minds between the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system. Okay, they're sort of, in some ways, they're sometimes they're a bit at odds with each other, and I'll explain how. Okay, so if we start with the prefrontal cortex, which I believe is the software of the healthy adult mode. This is where the computer programming hangs out for the healthy adult mode, in the prefrontal cortex of the brain. Okay, and what are the functions that this part of the brain performs? Okay, so Dr. Dan Siegel talks about these 9 functions of the prefrontal cortex, which I believe is the same as the functions of the healthy adult mode. Okay, and they are bodily regulation. Okay, so being able to scan our bodies and know what our bodies need at any given moment to maintain a sense of balance and health. Attuned communication with other people. So communication that takes into account the other person as well as the point that we're trying to make. Emotional balance. So being able to reflect on emotions and decide and choose which emotions do we give weight to and which emotions do we maybe push to the side or self-soothe, you know, so having that discernment when it comes to emotions. Fear extinction, so that is exposing ourselves to things that we might fear because we know that it will serve us to overcome those fears, as opposed to surrendering to those fears and avoiding feeling fear. Flexibility, obviously, so being able to, you know, go along with the flow of life and not be so rigid and say, well, this is how I always behave in these situations, as opposed to more flexibility and being able to take on board the more complex, nuanced issues in life. Insight, so, you know, being able to self-reflect, basically. Also empathy, being able to imagine what another person might be feeling or thinking in given situations and not only having access to our own. Morality, so having this, you know, higher sense of what is right and just in life. And intuition, you know, so there's wisdom, this wisdom that is sort of available to us in life when we are more accessing the prefrontal cortex, which is this sort of higher function of our brain. Okay, so I think that's the software of the healthy adult mode, and it hangs out there in our prefrontal cortex versus the limbic system. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the limbic system. That's more the emotion center of our brain. Okay, and in this system, we find the functions of emotions, memories, and arousal. Okay, and it includes the hippocampus, which is, I suppose, like a filing cabinet for all of our memories. You know, so many memories, like a movie screen reel, I suppose. And the amygdala, which is that fight or flight little tiny little peanut-sized part of the brain that gets activated and sets off whenever there's a perceived threat. Okay, so you can see how these two systems or parts of the brain could be at odds, because if we're experiencing a situation that we perceive is an immediate threat, then the limbic system is going to win out. It's going to win the battle, and it's going to say, you're under threat, you're in danger, respond according to that threat. Okay, but keep in mind that the limbic system is influenced by all of our past events, all of these memories about times when we might have been little. You know, we might have been 7 years old and in a similar situation, and our memory is telling us to watch out because when we were 7, we didn't have the skills to deal with that situation. But the limbic system can't differentiate between what was real when we were 7 and what's real now. And also it can't sort of sort out, well, I didn't have skills back then, but I have new skills and new resources now. It sort of can't make that discernment or judgment. Okay, so you can see how important it is then to cultivate this healthy adult side of us so that it can use some skills when it comes to emotion regulation, so that the limbic system doesn't just dictate how we live our lives. All right. So let's get into some key tasks that I believe are important if we want to really strengthen this healthy adult mode so that we can experience greater states of well-being in our lives. Okay, so one key task of the healthy adult mode is to maintain a separate sense of self. Okay, so that sort of ties into the little experiential exercise that I did at the start of the webinar, which is to really drop into your body and experience your own sense of self, your own identity, your own you-ness. So for me, it's like, you know, yes, this is my sense of who Tracey is, and an appreciation for how I'm different to other people. And of course, I'm very similar to lots of other people's in many, many ways. But if we boil it all down, ourselves as an individual cannot be replicated ever, ever, ever. You know, there can never be another you that has experienced what you've experienced and had the memories and events that have happened in your past, plus your own temperament, plus your personality, plus your own nervous system. All of these elements combine and just cannot be replicated in life. Okay, so it's so important to have this separate sense of self and identity, because then you're able to access your own opinions, your own thoughts, your own perspectives, your own contributions, etc. As opposed to not having that separate sense of self means that you sort of, the boundaries aren't clear between where you finish and the other person starts. So that leaves you open to having, say, maybe other people come in and dominate and dictate, you know, how you should be, what you should think, what you should do next. You know, and you see that a lot with unsolicited advice. You know, when people are saying, well, I think you should do this. And when people are saying that, I believe they mean well, but they're saying, what they're saying is, if it was me, I would do this. Okay. And, you know, there may be some usefulness in hearing what other people would do in this situation, but you can see how without that solid sense of self, that you risk taking on the thoughts, the opinions, the decisions of other people, which actually might turn out to be not the right decision for you. All right, so we address this in our in the Wellbeing Codes, and one of our Wellbeing Codes is confidence, and one of the components of confidence is individuality. It's really important to activate this sense of individuality. Okay, and when we don't heal that, or we don't address that and activate individuality, we may succumb to what's called the enmeshment undeveloped self schema. So when this schema or pattern is unhealed, it can create that blurred boundaries between what belongs to us and what belongs to someone else. Okay, and you know, if we're being honest, we're all a little bit enmeshed with someone or something in our lives. You know, it's hard to come out of childhood and into adulthood with that really clear sense of self, because, you know, children are so under the influence of their own parents and caregivers' beliefs and values and way of doing life. So it really is a task to, you know, to separate yourself out from your own cultural editors from your childhood and say, well, hang on a minute, which parts of that is me and my stuff that I want to retain and cultivate, and which is not my stuff. Okay, so there's one key task of the healthy adult mode, to maintain this separate sense of self. Very important. Okay, so sort of following on from that is another key task, which is obviously then to become skillful at boundary setting. Okay, so it's inevitable that we're going to have to set boundaries in our life. It's just impossible to go through life and have connections with other people without ever having to remind someone that, hey, you've crossed a bit of a line, or this is my boundary, or this is what I'm needing right now. Okay, so to set a boundary, then we need to be, again, connected to that center, to our own identity, but also we have to use the skill of assertiveness. Okay, so that's both being connected to our center, who we are. That's one part of it, but it's also the verbal expression of what we need, what we want, what our boundary is. Okay, because people are not going to know what our boundaries are unless we express them. They need to be communicated. And, if we're not so good at boundary setting, and we're not used to being open and self-expressed, and sometimes we can build this sort of resentment up over time because we know what we want and how we feel, and when a boundary is being crossed. But if we're not expressing it, then there's kind of this anger kind of builds up inside, and it sort of builds and builds and builds, almost like a volcano. And you'll find this, you'll reach a certain point in your adult life where you're like, enough's enough, and we just lose it because we haven't been setting these boundaries along the way, and then they come out in quite an explosive way, like a volcano erupting. Okay, but my message is it's never too late to start setting healthy boundaries in your life. If you activate assertiveness and you embrace this sort of quiet confidence that boundaries are healthy and normal, then you can become masterful at boundary setting, and also you can learn how to tolerate the tension that comes up whenever you set a boundary. Okay. So another key task of the healthy adult mode or side of us is that we develop autonomy and independence as a standalone person, that we're sort of able to cope and manage with some of the challenges that life throws at us. And we're able to discern when to deal with something as a standalone person versus when to reach out and ask for help. And so that in itself is a kind of autonomy. Knowing when to ask for help, that's still being autonomous. They're like, oh, I need help in this situation, I can't do this alone. Rather than either asking for help all of the time or never. Okay, so as we go through life and we develop wisdom, experience, and knowledge through our own relationship challenges and obstacles, we tend to arrive at some point midlife, where we begin to learn about healthy and unhealthy relationship dynamics. It's pretty rare to sort of reach 40 and not have experienced, both healthy and unhealthy relationship dynamics. I think around midlife, you start to go, so this is an example of a healthy relationship dynamic, and this is unhealthy. Okay, so how do we navigate that space? Well, again, Dr. Dan Siegel, an amazing man, he has coined the term MUI. Okay, so this is a new word that he made up, I don't know, 20 years ago or something like that. But he says MUI is the combination of me and we. So you put me and we together and you get MUI. Which means that in a healthy relationship dynamic, you're able to maintain the me, that individual sense of self, but also consider the relationship, what's important for harmony at the same time. Whereas if you're only about me, then that comes across as too self-absorbed, and the other person feels like you have no consideration for their experience. But if you're also too focused on we, then there's a risk of you becoming too other directed and too much focused on the other person, keeping the other person comfortable at the expense of your own separate sense of self. Okay, so it's really important to honor both individual needs and the needs of the relationship at the same time. So that's quite a complex task to master, but it's possible. Okay, so conflict is normal and expected in a two-person system. Okay, so we need to develop a new, more healthy relationship with conflict. So, under a more healthy perspective of relationships, it's inevitable for conflict to arise because, if you've got two individuals that are actually connected to their own sense of self and separateness and individuality, then naturally at times their two unique perspectives are not going to resonate, not going to be the same. They're going to have a different point of view, and that's fine and normal. They need to learn how to come together and navigate through that tension. Okay, so when conflict is welcomed and expected, then boundaries can be set, opinions can be voiced, and the relationship becomes a dance of balancing both the individual's needs and the needs of the relationship. Okay, so the tension that arises from this conflict, firstly, can be tolerated. We learn to just tolerate this tension, like stretch ourselves and go, no, this awkwardness is okay. This tension is okay. I don't need to react to it. I don't need to get rid of it. And then it can become integrated. We can just learn how to sit with tension rather than avoiding it, because it's very unhealthy when we just do anything to avoid tension. Because when we start going down that path, we start going along with other people's needs and wants and perspectives, and we lose our sense of self, and our self gets lost in that dynamic. Okay. So I'm just going to talk briefly about unhealthy relationship dynamics, just to get a good contrast. Usually there's a power imbalance in an unhealthy relationship dynamic. If it all boils down to one thing, there's a power imbalance. There's one person that is maybe overusing their power and one person that's underusing their power. So the two most problematic issues here are a lack of consideration. Let's say person A and person B. Okay, so the power imbalance happens when person A gets to determine what the boundaries and the rules of the relationship are, because they're always asserting their needs and saying, this is how it's going to be, and using certain tactics when those needs aren't immediately honoured. Okay, and then person B, when they attempt to set a boundary and a different opinion, they might be met with hostility or resistance, pushback, maybe even aggression or guilt. And so they kind of slink back and they give up some of their power. Okay, so two most problematic issues here is person A, their lack of consideration for the needs of person B. And so the relevant wellbeing code that we work on there is an aspect of self-discipline, consideration of others, healing from entitlement. Okay. And the second problematic issue is person B's low capacity to tolerate normal tension that arises when boundaries are set in relationships. So I would be looking at person B's low confidence, a low sense of autonomy, that they don't believe that they can cope with tension. They don't believe that they can cope with having another person disagree with them. Okay, so you can see how important it is to understand power imbalances in relationships, because, unhealthy relationships have all got a power imbalance, overuse and underuse of power. Okay. All right, so another key task of the healthy adult mode is that this side of us values emotions and logic, both of them. So sometimes in our society, there's an overemphasis on logic, and, you have to come up with the reason why. So my daughter, who's 9, I'll make a decision and then she'll say, but why? It's just like as if a rational explanation is going to somehow make everything okay. There's not always a rational explanation for everything. Sometimes there's a more complex decision-making process going on, which is emotional decision-making. Sometimes we decide things and it's outside of our awareness about why. And my message here is it's okay to say, I don't know why. I just something in me, I just feel like it, or I don't feel like it. So that's where intuition might come into it, or gut instinct. Yeah. As opposed to something that's very linear and makes logical sense, which is a very linear kind of one-dimensional decision-making process, as opposed to emotions, which go way deeper. Okay. So it's really important to value both emotions and logic, because both of these, the head and the heart, when they're working together, are able to make decisions together so that we can meet our core needs in life and live in alignment with our values and cultivate well-being. It's not possible to do that simply from logic, because humans are not robots. We're emotional creatures. We need to value our emotions and allow our feelings and our heart's, truth to be part of how we live our lives. Okay, so information therefore coming from the body and the heart, not just from the neck up, in the head, in the mind, but information coming from the body and the heart is extremely important for us to be able to register. We need to be able to drop into our hearts, into our bodies, and say, and I just teach people as a basic thing, just right now, you could put your hand on your heart. What is it that I feel? What is true for what is true for me? What does my heart tell me about why I'm feeling sad, why I'm feeling angry? Okay, so you're bypassing the head, which is too busy sometimes with logical and linear explanations. Okay, so it's really important to be able to access information coming from the body and the heart. Okay, because this information is connected to our deepest core self and our values and our needs. Okay, so when trauma or unmet needs have occurred in our childhoods, there can be a real cutting off from the body, from the information coming from our heart, from the neck down, because it wasn't safe to access and feel information coming from our bodies. Because if we actually listened to our bodies, it would tell us that it is very unsafe, and we would be overwhelmed because we wouldn't have a solution or know what to do next. All right, so moving on to one more key task of the healthy adult mode. And this is the side of us that wants to pursue goals, desires, connection, mastery, and joy, all of these great things in life. Okay, so when we have a strong, healthy adult mode, we are going to be pursuing positive life experiences. We're going to be going after the things that we want. Okay, we're going to be sort of arms wide open saying, yes, please, more of that in life. Okay, however, when there might have been trauma and there's unprocessed trauma from the past, I'm not saying that anyone who's experienced trauma cannot really cultivate this healthy adult mode, but when it's unprocessed, it hasn't been looked at, it hasn't been released. Okay, so when that happens, these higher goals, what we truly want in life, can take a back seat, because the unprocessed trauma, the fear, and that perception of threat is still active in our awareness. So we might not be fully aware of where this anxiety is coming from, where it originated, but we just feel anxious. Okay, so if we just feel anxious, then we're going to be listening to our anxious thoughts, which are saying, don't do that, or don't put yourself in that situation. Don't take a risk. Don't reveal how you feel. Don't put yourself out there. Don't make a fool of yourself. So we're going to be more dictated to by the unprocessed trauma, as opposed to our healthy adults' goals, desires, and wants and needs. Okay, so two things I want to say here. One, yes, you can absolutely go to therapy and take some time to process that trauma. And that can take a while, because it's such a delicate process of unpacking trauma and processing that. Okay. But not everyone feels the need to go to the need to go to therapy. They have a good sense of their traumas, that maybe they've done therapy before, and they're ready to step more into the next phase of their life. Okay, and a lot of the work that we do at the Wellbeing Codes is to bring our attention and our focus on what we do want in our life. And actually, whenever we do that, when we focus on what we do want, if we start saying to ourselves, I want more connection, I want more freedom, I want more of a slow pace in my life, I want to be less rushed, I want to cut back on my work, or I want to connect more with my partner. When we start to talk about what we do want, that process itself actually brings to light all of the wounds, all of the unprocessed trauma, and all of the fears that are in the way. Because, the minute that we step towards the thing that we want, there's something in us, in our bodies, that wants to pull us back and say, oh, don't go down that path. So even just the process of focusing on what we do want is in itself healing, because it's going to reveal to you all of the unprocessed traumas and wounds that would need to be worked through in order for you to go after those things that you want. Okay, so when we do this process, we actually can become more discerning about what are our just perceived threats, based on our past experiences. So what of our anxiety is from the past and from schemas that we might have learned in childhood, versus what are real threats, what's a real threat in this moment, like a life or death thing that we should actually pay attention to because it's going to have real consequences for us, versus, what are just new challenges to be overcome. So we're probably going to have the same reaction to all three of those. In our limbic system, the amygdala is going to be registering all three of those events as threatening. Okay, but when we become more discerning, we can say, I'm having this fear response, but it's actually a challenge that I want to overcome. I think it's going to be more healthy for me to face this fear and to develop the tools and the strategies and the resources to navigate this challenge, as opposed to back down from it and keep away from it. Okay, so you can see where that discernment really starts to kick in there. Okay, so at this point, then we really start to engage the healthy adult mode, rather than allowing that limbic system to rule our lives. Because the limbic system is more concerned with survival. It's got all the memories from our childhood stashed away in it. And it's going to, if it has the chance, it's going to just throw a memory from childhood up, and we're going to probably respond more from that place, rather than a more focused and aligned place that's more connected to the here and now, to the present. Okay. All right, lovely. So now I'm going to talk briefly about the use of imagery as a means to access, strengthen, and direct our healthy adult modes. So some of you may already be using imagery a lot in your professional life, in your practice. And a lot of the training, at least the training that I've done, uses imagery to process past events. So it's amazing that you can go back in the imagination, back in time, to a time when you were 7 or a time when you were 12, and talk to and connect to that past you, that child, that inner child, and give them what they need in that moment using imagery. Okay, so that's one way that imagery is used. It's very powerful. And it's powerful because it bypasses the thinking mind. It bypasses the left side of the brain, goes straight to the right side of the brain, where the imagination lives and emotions live. And our hopes and dreams also reside. Okay. And the reason why imagery is important is because all emotions sort of, originate in the right side of the brain, including fear, anxiety, anger, all of that, but also joy and love and more expansive and positive emotions. Okay, so without tapping into the positive emotions that accompany our goals, then our goal setting kind of just becomes a really dry, stale intellectual process. Like, what's my 10-year plan? And how much money do I want to be earning by this time next year? Or, by what age do I want to be married and have children? Like, if you're not connecting those life goals to the feelings that are going to accompany that goal, then it just loses its power. Because remember, I said we're emotional creatures. Emotions are very powerful when we can really channel them and direct them in a way that is most useful for us. Okay, so that's why imagery is an important and powerful tool, and we're gonna use that right now. Okay, so just another point about how powerful imagery is. If you've ever wondered, why some therapies that just involve talking, talk about the problem, go over the problem, describe it, give another example, say, well, this week this happened to me, and we go back and forth, and why do you think that happened? And what, that talk, just only talking about problems and wondering why that doesn't lead to the full, deeper healing, it's probably because there's a lack of emotional change that takes place. Just because we talk about something or understand something doesn't mean that it changes our emotional experience about that thing. Okay, so emotional change happens when we feel the feeling, and then we can release the negative emotions that are connected to that event, as well as, and sometimes this is missing sometimes in therapy, as well as experience and enhance the positive emotions that we want to feel more of. Okay, so in my training as a clinical psychologist, we're really good at negative emotions. I trained for 8 years on negative emotions, but there wasn't a lot of talk about the positive emotions that my clients might be seeking to experience more of. Yes, they want to get rid of depression and anxiety and sadness and frustration and loneliness, but there wasn't a lot of training on how can we cultivate more positive emotions. And in fact, are our clients actually seeking that? Are they coming to us because they also want to feel better, not just because they want to stop feeling so bad? Okay, so both of these experiences can be achieved with imagery work, both releasing negative emotions and enhancing positive emotions. Okay, so let's do something right now with imagery. Okay, so we've been talking a lot so far about the healthy adult mode. You're having a really good sense of what it feels like in your body to be connected to the healthy adult mode, and also what it's all about. It's all about going after the things that you want in life that are in alignment with who you are. Okay, so what we're going to do now is a brief imagery exercise where you can experience how the two of these work together. Okay, so I am going to close my eyes and also turn off my video so that I can focus on the imagery. Okay, so I invite everyone to close their eyes. Take a few breaths in and out. And take a moment to access your healthy adult mode. And if it's useful, you can imagine that your healthy adult mode is located in the middle of your belly, in your solar plexus region. And once you have that clear sense of self and who you are as a person, I invite you to time travel 1 year into the future, which would make it July of 2022. Traveling 1 year into the future, and allow yourself to see your life as you would most want it to be in a year from now. Take a moment to become aware of the conditions that have shifted as you work towards this life that you're wanting to cultivate. What has changed? What's different about you? What behaviors have you started to release? And what new behaviors have you started to develop? Also, what connections are you putting more of your energy into? Pay attention to the people that you most enjoy spending your time with, the people that you resonate with, where there's a lovely flow of giving and taking. It feels lovely and balanced. And take a moment to become aware of the pace of your life. And especially the structure and the routine of your day. What does your morning routine look like? Have you made any changes to your work schedule, or even your workplace, or even your career? Just take a moment to spend some time feeling into this new life in 1 year from now. And become really aware of the feelings that you have in your body and your heart. What do you notice? Perhaps a sense of peace or calmness, maybe a sense of certainty or courage, maybe more joy and love. And as you do this exercise, as you picture your life, at the same time become aware of what you've had to overcome. What are your own vulnerabilities? What are the habits? What are the patterns from your past? What are the wounds that you've had to address? And unblock yourself from, to allow you to move forwards into this life 1 year in the future. And imagine just putting one hand on your forehead, one hand on your belly, and just really having that sense of how your solar plexus, your identity center in your body, and also your intuition, your prefrontal cortex in your brain, how the two of these are connected and working together. And take one final breath in and out. Lock it in. And slowly wriggle your fingers, wriggle your toes, and you can open your eyes. Okay, very good. Lovely, lovely. Okay, hope that some of you were able to really have a felt sense of the healthy adult mode in that imagery, and you can also see how it can be used in this more future directed sense, you know, towards the things that you're wanting to experience in your life, and not only about processing past memories and events. All right. Lovely. So we're coming up to the end of the webinar, and just start to have a think about if you've got any questions, because I'm happy to take everyone off mute in a moment. Okay, just quickly in terms of working with us, if you're interested in, actually finding out more about the Wellbeing Codes, we have got a Wellbeing Mastermind. And it's a 6-month wellbeing mastermind that people can join at any time. So there's no sort of rush or pressure to join. And we cover 6 wellbeing codes. So we do one every month. And in August, we're going to be starting on the confidence code. So if you're sort of interested in going really deep into wellbeing and understanding, well, what is confidence and where does confidence come from and how do you cultivate it, then that is exactly what we're going to be talking about through August. Okay, so we've got a lovely mastermind. There's 11 people in it at the moment, having a good time. All right, and it is just for health professionals and therapists, so it's not open to the general public. Okay, so if that's something that you're keen on learning more about, you can book a call with us just by going onto our website, and under programs and then under Wellbeing Mastermind, you'll find the link to book a call with us. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed talking about the healthy adult mode, having a felt sense in the body of it, and you've got some nice easy techniques or strategies to use. I will get that script out to you all so you can, but please feel free to tweak it and kind of apply your own language and wording to it so that it just doesn't sound like me. It sort of sounds like you, your unique self. Okay, lovely. All right, thanks so much everyone for joining me live today. You'll also get a recording of this and the slides to take a look at. And I hope you have a wonderful Friday and wonderful weekend, everyone. See you later.